there, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. Great to see you all. As always, I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. Tonight, Jeff is going into our current events as usual. He's going to speak to the indictment of Donald Trump, and also he's going to touch on our economy. There have been some shifts there. And our topic for this evening is the truth about the birth chart. Jeff is going to break it down for us. So take it away, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. Well, as we said here, I think it was last week or the week before that, I don't think this is going to get legs, even though they've indicted him. Even, I've listened to a lot of different legal experts on this, and the astrology says he's not going down. There's no way they're going to arrest him and incarcerate him or prosecute him. It shows this thing could even potentially get dismissed. It has, I think, run out on the statutes of limitations. Secondly, the legal basis for this is not very strong, according to many people who've commented on it, including his attorney. But I think they're also going to try and move the venue, too. So this thing, again, even though they've indicted him, I still don't think it's going to get legs. We'll see what happens. But I will say this, and I said this before, I think they're going to try and either take Donald Trump out physically, or I'm much more concerned about the Mar-a-Lago obstruction of justice charges that the DOJ has against him right now, because I think that's got a lot more teeth than anything else that this prosecutor. What I do think this is going to do, though, is cause huge political ramifications where everybody's going to be talking about it. It's actually probably, I think Elon Musk was right. I think it's going to almost ensure now that he's the nominee and could win in the 2024 election. But I also have to say this supports exactly what we've been saying about the astrology. This country is going to really come apart over this next 2 years. It is going to be one wild boat ride, which brings me into the next point, the U.S. financial system. And many, many people are saying in the financial communities that I've spoken to and that I've heard, and it supports what the astrology says, and that is, I don't think the bank runs are done. I think they're just beginning. I think the Fed's going to keep bailing it out, but something just happened again yesterday that solidified a deal between the South American oil producers, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. In other words, the BRICS nations are coming together. This could potentially collapse the United States dollar and remove us from the powers that we have enjoyed for probably the last 100 years for sure as the world's, sustaining superpower. So this is not good financially. And this also parallels what I've been saying, the Pluto return, which really in the sidereal zodiac begins next year, 3 times into the beginning of 2025. Also, I think this thing with Trump, as well as many of the other things that are coming together with all these horrible shootings and the clashes here with many political issues, as well as the terrorist cells that have been brought over the border. I think we're going to see Hell Come to Breakfast really seriously this year as that primary directed Mars conjoins the United States moon for the first time ever. Wow. And 240, of course, then it'll be 247 years because the United States will be 247 years old this summer, July 4th. Right. And it sure looks dicey to me. It really does.
Wow, shaky times for sure. Speak to Trump's angel sitting on the ascendant. You were talking about that. We all have an angel, right?
Yeah.
It's sitting on our ascendant. It's interesting. The description of this kind of really does suit him. Very interesting there.
It does. That's something, tonight's topic is, what really truly is a birth chart? What is it? And, a lot of astrologers today say, your sun sign is this and your rising sign is that and your moon is that. And I really have to disagree. I do not think our astrology is a bunch of planets and signs. What I really think it is a reflection of the soul. And this goes back to the ancient Nadi astrology and the Vedic astrology. And I also might mention the Egyptian astrology as well, where essentially the soul is tied to the body at first breath. It's actually attached to the embryo at conception. And then at first breath, that is when you could say the celestial imprint of the soul arriving permanently into the body for the duration of the incarnation, or you could say this life. So what's fascinating about this is, I often get into this conversation. In the past, I've talked to a lot of rabbis about this, and, I always get the response, well, Israel's above the astrology. And we get the same thing in the Christian religion, that we are above, the soul is above astrology. Absolutely correct and right. And what is astrology? Well, in fact, I was on George Norrie's Coast to Coast a while back, and he struck me with that question. He said, Jeff, what really is astrology? And it's such a great question, because what is it really? It is not just a matrix, but if you envision, there's something called the worlds of absolute, where your soul is believed to be created. And then the next worlds down is called Braya, or Bria, some people pronounce it. They say there's 49 dimensions, 49 subdimensions in each one of these worlds. And then there's the Yetziratic world, which is a strange word that means where the heavens form. Yetzira means formation. So I propose something much different, and I'm actually not the creator of this one. It seems like the ancient seers, which were also known as the rishis, and the ancient rabbis and the ancient seers in the ancient world who were in touch with angels, said that the astrology mirrors the soul's energies as it plays out. I always tell people, think of satellites. Right now, there's a good modern analogy. You have satellites circling this earth constantly, and there are billions of signals going through those satellites. In fact, anyone who's on the internet is likely to be going through a satellite. The local cable company beams it up, hits a satellite, and of course, the networks back down to wherever you are. Well, here's the point. Every single signal is completely individualized. Nobody can hear anybody else. Once in a while, we might hear it, but very rarely. It's all individualized. Well, that's exactly how the soul force energy might be working from the Briatic and Yetziratic worlds down into us souls, all individually. It's a reflection. And it's interesting because even in Donald Trump's chart, and on every chart I look at, I always look at the angels, the ancient angels in the sidereal zodiac that rule the eastern horizon. In other words, when we're born, the exact moment in time our soul is tied to the body is referred to as the eastern horizon, or astrologers like to call it the ascendant. That's why longitude, latitude, and exact time is taken for where you're born, because that moment in time is when the soul's tied to the body. Well, interestingly enough, if you shot a laser out into space, you would literally hit the sidereal angelic degree that is surrounding the earth at all times. It's quite magical. And every time I see a client, I can tell if the birth time's right on or not based on the matching of the personality of that influence of that angel. It's absolutely stunning. And, speaking of Donald Trump, he was born in a very interesting degree. It's actually called the degree of strategy. Now, for those that hate him, I know they're going to hate hearing this, but I'd also tell you that it is one who is compelled to fight and struggle a great deal of their lives, and will often have to use a lot of ingenuity to release themselves from the entanglements and troubles they get themselves into. Yet they have a special mission from an extraordinary purpose. And it's really quite interesting because it also says it gives the person an extraordinary character. And it also says they cannot fail to be a ruler of men and a giant among humanity. So no matter whether you hate Donald Trump or you like Donald Trump, he certainly fits that, because he either has people vehemently loving him. And I talk to a lot of people who go to his rallies and they say it's like watching Elvis. You know, they can just feel the electricity. And I also know a lot of people who hate his guts, and they say the same thing. I hate that guy with a passion. So it's very interesting the amount of emotion he stirs in this angelic degree fits that. Now, the question is that angel influencing that soul, or is it a part of the soul's energy that brought that angel to support that? And I think the latter. So in other words, the astrology is not us. In other words, we may be the celestial influences of the soul. The spirit, the psyche, and the soul is extremely complex. And I love looking at astrology from this completely reverse position, because if you see someone with a particular, like all the time, I'm doing readings for people, and I can read that angel out of this codex, and I find, oh my God, it's so accurate. It's creepy. It just fits every single person. And if it doesn't, the birth time's wrong. So the astrology is really a reflection of who we are as a spirit and a soul.
Extraordinary. It's so extraordinary. And if we really look at that very closely, that's why I'm always feeling like the astrology is such a guide throughout our lives. If we can really tap into it and understand it and take it at face value, if it's interpreted properly.
Yeah. And well, that's the key right there. It actually proves God. It actually proves souls, and it proves that souls are placed into the body at a specific time for a certain journey. It's actually very sacred, and it proves the sacredness and the multifaceted energies that all the planets seem to be raining down on all of us. It's stunning. You know, I talk to doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and people just in everyday life, and everyone concurs these cycles are so powerful. I see it in my own life, and it's absolutely amazing how strong these forces are. The ancient Vedantic system, of course, now it's turned into Hinduism, but prior to that, you had the Tibetan Lamas, you had the Buddhists, the Buddhists came a little bit later. But long story short, this is one of the few places in the world where this has stayed intact, where it hasn't gotten into dogma, but has been an actual integrated part of a spiritual system, that we're all spiritual beings here, purifying and rectifying the souls. And I may say, to the credit of the Chaldeans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and also the Hebrews, particularly, texts like the Sharia Gilgam, which we've talked about earlier on other texts, really support this, that the astrology is not us, but that we may be why the astrology was printed on the soul at the time we were born. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah. And we were speaking earlier about reincarnation and how our soul's journey isn't just this one form that we're experiencing right now. I find that so interesting. And I know that you have spoken about feeling like you have had other experiences in other lifetimes before this one. Yep. And how that comes through. And you've also spoken about the reason why we can't really remember it. You spoke about this mark here, and why we can't remember these past lives.
Yeah, I always got kind of irritated. I thought, God, why would you do that to us? Why can't we remember our past lives?
Right.
Why can't we go there? Well, they actually say, there's actually several texts. One in particular, I think it was in the Zohar, mentions, alas for the blindness of the sons and daughters of humans, that if we could see what was about us, we wouldn't be able to live our lives the way that we do. And a lot of people I talk to, they're like, I don't want to come back here anymore. This is so hard here on Earth. And it is. Earth is a tough place, man. It's a place of purification and dissipation of karmic energy, both of good and of ill. it's kind of like the salmon swimming up the stream. And, when I first started studying Vedic and Naadi astrology, I thought to myself, wow, this is a little bit tough, like it seems like you're always getting punched. You get a little break and you get a lot of positive, and then you get, hit a little bit more. And it's really because it shows the journey of the soul dissipating the karmas and also creating new ones. And one of the coolest things I think about that realization is you realize that really the only thing you take with you when you exit these meat suits known as bodies is really going to be the conscious self-awareness that you gather. And we mentioned a lot of books on previous podcasts, like the Magus of Strovolos, the Sharia Gilgum, 30 Years Among the Dead, Freeing the Captives. Those are just a few. The Rabbi Fateh's Menot Yehuda. These are all perfect examples that no one dies. The Rosicrucian systems say that, the Egyptians say that, almost every culture in the world has said that and still does. And I don't know why Rome went out of its way to say, you're all sinners and you're all going to hell. But, it's okay. I can see where they might have developed some of that attitude somewhere between the 1st and the 3rd century. But it really flies in the face of almost everything I see in the Nadi and the Vedic astrology.
Yeah. Well, talking about the truth about the birth chart, what we see when we look at the birth chart, we see that continuance, right? We were speaking about this earlier this afternoon. I gave my cat as an example when he was very, very sick because he was a soul having a physical experience, just like we are. When he was very, very sick, you said, when we looked at his chart, it showed that if he could get through the next 3 or 4 days, then he would, keep going, keep moving on. And he didn't. But we could see in his chart that that his soul kept going on. He went on to have other experiences. So that is in the birth chart as well. Not only this current life experience that we're having now, but what's ahead long after we're out of these physical bodies is also in the birth chart.
Yeah, a lot of that's been lost, but I'll tell you, a lot of the Nadi documents make references to that. The moon's nodes, particularly K2, which is the moon's south node where eclipses happen, and the north node show a lot to that. Also, Jupiter has a lot of effects on that too. So you can actually see backwards the probabilities of what might have happened to you in the past few lives. You can keep going. I always kind of am a little cautious on how far back you go because it gets murky. But you actually can. Yeah. And it's really quite fascinating stuff. You can see, whether you were murdered or whether you were likely to have had a very good life. Like I see this a lot of times. I'll see people who have just really great mental capabilities. They're like engineers, and I'm like, you did this in a past life. Well, how do you know? Well, because you can see where Jupiter and K2 make the yogas and the aspects in the chart. It's really fascinating stuff. And you can also see whether you're likely to have been involved in a positive or negative way with siblings or parents and so on and so forth. It's really quite interesting the way that Nadi astrology and Vedic astrology looks at the chart. Again, it's not looking at us as the astrology, but more looking at the astrology as to what we've done and where we are and where we might be going. Like there's many phrases in Nadi astrology. Well, this person will attain something called enlightenment. They call it moksha. Like likely after this lifetime, they're going to move up and move on. See, it's really locked in. And, I'm a firm believer in all kinds of motivational things. I really believe that we can change fate and karma, but boy, the charts sure seem to be locked in. And that's because the lower conscious mind is so fixed, which relates to a lot of what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the world has changed so drastically. And everyone is so fixed where they're at. It's really hard because and we also have a lot of demonic forces taking advantage of this change. And, talking about like this country and the world at large, we have some really demonic and destructive forces right now coming in to incarcerate. And, can we say eugenics? This is something that has ebbed and flowed throughout history. When you really take away all the names and everything else, and you just look at the energies that are happening, this is a repeat. It's another cycle of trying to call the population and trying to move humanity in a new direction. And these ebbs and flows constantly happen. And I can tell you the United States and the rest of the world, the Western world at large, is clearly going to be in a major conflict here in the next couple of years if things aren't changed. We're going to be either destroyed as a country as we know it, or we're going to be the phoenix rising out of the ashes. And that's,
Well, these demonic forces, very powerful. These demonic forces that we talk about, aren't they here as well to purify and rectify?
Well, that, again, I'm not here to make any claims, but the best that I can glean is that the best words was used by Rabbi Maharil. That was a text we talked about back on the spring equinox. I encourage people to watch that video because in that text, I mentioned the sacred book of Abramelin, which it basically says that the evil spirits are unredeemed. That's maybe why they hate the human race so much. They've literally been incarcerated, not only here, but down in the lower Yetziratic dimensions. And I can't speak because I don't have knowledge, I don't think anyone does, about how much they're incarcerated in other dimensions. But I know this particular one, they certainly are. And that may be even deeper than a molecular level. In the Nadi, they really put it forward quite accurately in the Nadi astrology. Everything is creation, growth, sustenance, decay, and destruction. Think about that. Everything on this planet goes through that. I don't care what it is. All life goes through that. Even the mineral and even the plant kingdoms. Of course, the mineral kingdom's much slower, but we still see the destruction. Everything is creation, growth, sustenance, destruction, and that's it. It recycles. So, and the spirits, the unredeemed spirits, the evil ones, seem to be incarcerated and forced to do that for what we might call the eternity of time. And that's why they maybe hate us and creation, is because the human soul, unless it gets consumed by the evil spirits by doing a lot of black magic and bad stuff, it will move on. We actually escape from Alcatraz and move on to the higher realms. And many of us stay here. So there really does seem to be that Earth is a place where the soul comes to get unentangled from all the spiritual you could say blemishes that we seem to have collected by moving down into these lower dimensions. Very interesting stuff. Yeah. And that seems to be supported in most of your ancient texts.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's so interesting because when we think about this purification and rectification, and then when we look at our birth charts, we can see, at least in my chart, when you've read my chart, there's a sense of direction. It's almost like the chart is offering a sense of direction to do that, to purify and rectify. When we go through certain transits and have these progressions happening, there's the opportunity to purify and rectify and understand that through looking at the birth chart.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a whole nother language. That's why when I do readings for people, I always have them watch these couple of 3 videos before, because it's just a whole nother world to immerse into. And again, it's one that I was, like, wow, this is just such a different way of looking at life. And I think it's a healthy way of looking at it because it proves why artificial intelligence will never, ever be what we are. And I think that sacredness of humanity has to always be maintained, and of all life, because machines can be programmed to act like life. They'll never be life. They cannot be life. I always liked that movie AI that Steven Spielberg did. And it was about all the robots. Jude Law was in it. And that other little boy that played in The Sixth Sense. And what happened, he was the little robot, the little boy. And the world had been kind of destroyed and all humanity was gone, especially I think out in New York. And they tried to recreate life. These angels came in and they said, we can't do that. We can play you a video, but we can't recreate life. And that's something that I think is really a good thing to always be in touch with, is that life is very divine and very, very sacred. And the consciousness is not localized to the body. The third eye chakra always has, you could say, the ability to integrate consciousness into these physical bodies. It's really magical stuff. And the astrology certainly seems to show the ebbs and flows throughout life that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another good book that you introduced me to a couple of years ago is The 72 Angels.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that one, but that is a great, great, great book.
Well, that gets into the Shem Hemiforish, which everyone may not recognize, but that is actually Exodus in the Bible. Exodus, of course, is in the Old Testament, but it's the 72 encrypted angels that are actually embedded through cryptology in the 3 verses of Exodus. And that is truly one of the probably most ancient references to King Solomon and the Goetia. It's very dangerous stuff, but it's also very sacred stuff. And it proves again that the whole matrix of astrology is really angelic. And it seems to play through the planets, and the etheric energy of the soul and the spirit cannot be fully measured. You can't weigh it. You can't put a meter on it. It's beyond electricity. This is, like gemstones. People often say to me, why do I want to wear a gemstone? Well, I can tell you why. The gemstones vibrate when they're completely natural to the vibrations of the planets, and you can actually enhance or decrease certain areas of your birth chart. That's why Vedic Planetary Gemology was the most accurate, because getting the right gemstone, wearing it up against the body when it's set at a good time and it's totally natural, will never run out of energy because it vibrates and transmits the celestial energies. It doesn't have it. It's passing it through. So that's why it'll never run out of energy, because it's not the source of it. And that's why it's really a very powerful thing. And
very,
I have
very
so
powerful.
many people tell me about how they feel about that.
Oh, yeah. I wear my gems, and I always wear this blue sapphire. You told me to wear it.
Yeah.
I should be wearing it until I take my last breath.
Yeah,
So I absolutely will. That kind of scared me a little bit. I didn't think about it that way, but I certainly will. And I definitely feel the difference when I take it off and then put it back on. It's like, wow, I can really feel it when I'm not wearing it. Interesting how the gemstones are mapped out in the birth chart as well, which gemstones one should be wearing.
Yeah. And that's right. Yeah, it's amazing. And then also what I do is I set them to the person's birth chart, which literally makes it a talisman. So in other words, I cast the metals on a good day. I actually have someone do that for me. They cast it at a shop. They're really good at it. Cast it right when I say, and then we set the gem to the person's birth chart when the gem is the planet ruling the gem aspects that particular gem and your birth chart. So it literally becomes a talisman. And then there's a whole procedure to cleanse and charge it. So it's really some cool stuff. And that's what the ancient kings and queens used to have done for them.
Yeah, they did. They did so many amazing secrets in the birth chart that many people don't speak about at all. Like just the angel on the ascendant and the angels that I hope to come back as an angel.
Even the angels in your dashas
coming back as a human.
Even the angels that rule planets, when they aspect certain things in your chart, it's way more complex than any of us can fully figure out. But boy, if you had the time, it's amazing. I've actually done that. And I do the best I can do in readings, which is complex enough. But man, you can take it so deep that it's actually unbelievable how accurate it can get when you really get in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you always say it's like you can look and look and look, but you'll never fully grasp what it is, because it is such a mystery. It's such a deep mystery. This existence, this experience is just such an incredible mystery. It
is. And the real entanglement in quantum physics is the complexity of the soul and the soul roots attached to all these different energies that can never be fully ascertained unless you really were probably talking to angels. That would be the only way you'd ever fully know. But one thing's for sure, the little bit we can see is quite amazing. It really is. And it's interesting because it gives guidance. And I'm always pleased when I can help somebody see when something challenging is going to end or when it's coming in so they know it. And then also to tell them when it ends, because it's all just energy. It's all just energy that we were kind of destined to experience.
Yeah, well, it seems that way. It seems like the birth chart is a blueprint of the journey that we're going through individually. Yep. That's why we can't put ourselves in these boxes called Gemini, Aries, Taurus, Pisces. That's exactly why we're not that. We're so much more than that. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, Vedic and Naadi astrology blows that away so far. It's not even funny. And it's a sidereal system, too. It's really quite interesting. Right.
Well, thanks, Jeff. We wanted to keep this one a little short, but just really speak to the birth chart, what it is, and how much power it holds, and how much we should really just feel so grateful that the astrology is there as a guide, and it really is. It really is a guide and a great support.
You bet.
Yeah, right. Thank you all so very much for watching and listening, and we will see you next Friday.
Thanks for listening.